professional counselor. Um, some people say psychotherapist. I'm also a Reiki master and have certifications in various different energy healing modalities, and I'm a spiritual coach. The best way to find me actually is to go to Psychology Today's website and put my name in and put Georgia, and you'll find me.
Perfect. So first question for you, how did you get involved in this type of work and why?
Well, can you specify the word? Trauma? Is that where you're going?
Let,
Is
let's
that where
let's
we're
go
going? Is just with trauma?
everything. We're gonna take all the tools out of your tool belt, everything.
Okay, okay. So, the way I put it is every step I've ever made was the right step to make. And I'll say that even with what we think are mistakes, they're usually lessons and not mistakes. And if we look at it from that point of view, we feel like we live a purposeful life. So I definitely do feel like I have lived a purposeful life, and every experience I've gone through, especially the really big ones, good and bad and kind of in between, um, have led me down a path that is a blessing because I get to take what I've been through and use it as fodder, right, to help other people to heal and to have resiliency and to have hope and to activate some pretty interesting things for themselves. So very early in life, at age 5 years old, I had a near-death experience where I drowned, and I was almost there when I got pulled back. And I was pretty pissed, coughing, choking, crying. I was mad. I was almost there. And a few months later, I had encephalitis from chickenpox that didn't break out. So it attacked inward. So it attacked my nervous system. And during the hospital stay, I was swimming in a way through the hallways and visiting different places, and then coming back and doing a little dive kind of thing and coming back into my body. And I would even have these moments where I'm like, how can I be here and there at the same time? And I'm looking at me in the bed, right? So then I would do what I thought was waking up because at that age, I had no idea what I was experiencing. I thought maybe I was dreaming because I knew what dreams were, right? But I would tell my mom like some of the things I saw, and she would go and validate, come back and ask questions. So I was having out of body experiences. Those two experiences at age 5, I think, kept me open. And what I mean by that is, I believe when we're born, we are still so connected to so many different dimensions, and our energy is wide open. It's so, I would say pure, but that would be a challenge to define, right? But through experiences in the family, in the community, imposed beliefs, ways of thinking, we get conditioned, right? We get this, what I call clutter in our energy field, and we forget, right? We forget who we are, why we're here. And when you are what I call a high frequency being, which many of us right now are, then it's almost like you're required to have this dense, heavy energy to anchor you here just to be here. And a lot of that comes in the form of trauma. So we have various types of forms of trauma. We have interpersonal trauma, we have, which is with other people, right? We can have religious trauma. We've got traumas from our news media. We have natural disasters. We have war, accidents, and violence, right? So we come into this world that is just heavy with all of that stuff. And then we have all this conditioning that makes us kind of, in a way, tolerate it. And I hate to put it that way, but that's kind of what we do until we get our resiliency built. So for me, growing up, I grew up in a home of with two divorced women, my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother was divorced in the 50s when it was taboo to be divorced, right? She was a single mom, and she was a career woman, but she was a nurse, so that kind of gave her a little bit of, you know, room there. And she, I do believe, was mentally ill. She had, looking at it now, right? When I can look back on it now, I see all the indications of bipolar disorder with psychotic features. And I'll tell you why I believe that, why I believe it developed actually. We know that when we shut down something that is natural to who we are, then it goes into shadow. And whatever goes into shadow grows in the dark. And eventually it busts out from the basement door, so to speak, through one's behavior. So, the easy extreme example is the priest who denies his sexuality and then eventually molests the altar boys, right? Or the acolytes or whatever. So my grandmother was, I think she was bisexual, and growing up right in that Stonewall era, as well as being raised primitive Baptist Christian, that was something that even if she had the thought, she would have shut it down very quickly, wouldn't have entertained it. Secondly, she was very psychic. She is extremely psychic. But she was raised in that primitive Baptist culture that believed that that was of the devil. And of course, we know now that a lot of that's just conditioning. That is just control and conditioning. So I believe she shut down to a degree. I can't say she fully shut it down because we did talk about intuitive experiences in our dreams and paranormal phenomenon, spiritual beliefs and religious beliefs in our home, but not much outside of the home. So I think years and years and years of her having this suppressed and repressed is what led to her having mental illness. And because of the way she treated my mom growing up, my mom had borderline personality disorder, I'm pretty sure of. Now, there's a reason a psychotherapists aren't supposed to diagnose our family. But I can say, with both of them having passed away, I can be objective enough and have processed with other colleagues to really kind of look at things. And I hate to look at things from a pathological view all the time. I really don't like having to, but it gives us some sense of common language and common understanding to a degree to at least understand what the person may be going through and their loved ones what they may be going through, right? And whatever treatment can be necessary. So growing up in a home of my mom being divorced, my grandmother being divorced, both of them struggling with mental health issues, which I see as a trickle down effect from thousands of years of the suppression and oppression of the divine feminine. So that piece right there became a huge mission for me recently. So I did. I grew up with, abuse in the home. I grew up very intuitive and wide open from my own personal experiences at age 5. I was the weird kid at school because I was the one I didn't have any empathic boundaries. So, I would go into the classroom at the beginning of the day and be in a totally fine mood. And within an hour, hour and a half, I was ready to go home with a headache and a stomach ache because somebody looked at me wrong. But it wasn't somebody looked at me wrong that was causing me to have all these feelings. It was the fact that I was feeling everybody's shit. I was feeling it all at one time and thinking it was me, thinking that I was just all over the place inside of me. And I didn't know for the longest time that that was other people's stuff and I didn't have to carry it. And that's where a lot of this generational and ancestral trauma healing comes in. That key element right there. I don't know if you want me to keep going or if you have a question at this
No,
point.
that is perfect because that the way you described it, Mindy, it brought me back to some of the stuffs I used to see in my teenage years within my family, which just confused me, right? I'm like, why is that actually happening? And then when I became an adult in my 20s, I started to see it in my relationship. I was like, oh, okay, I know why I'm starting to see this in my own life now. It's because I saw it as a child and maybe my parents saw it
Mhm,
as theirs, and we're all
mhm.
repeating
Right.
it.
Yes, yes.
That,
No
yeah,
telling
as you
how far
mentioned,
back it goes.
yeah, like when it gets passed down like that, does it become a part of identity then?
It can. It can. It definitely can. because a lot of times we form our identity based on the expectations of people around us and the core beliefs that we grow up with about ourselves and the world around us and other people. So I will say this too, like the reason I'm not, well, yes, I do have had PTSD. I've actually truly healed the trauma, but the reason I'm as, I guess you could say, sane and grounded as I am is because of spiritual resiliency. And when I really look back on it, being raised in a home where we privately talked about intuition and dreams, there's that feminine, right? And then we went to church, right? There's some patriarchal control, right? I'm just going to call it what it is at this point. Um, I, as a child playing in the yard, because I mean, my generation, we played in the yard. These kids got to get in the yard, right? So I had these two friends that would come sometimes and play with me. My sister partially remembers this. She's younger than me, but I had these two friends, a guy named Shua, and that's how I would say it as a kid. And he was like my big brother, and his girl Miriam, and that's how I would say her name. And it didn't dawn on me, even growing up in the church until I was about 10 or 11 years old, that the preacher must have said Shua, Yeshua, or something. And I like something woke up in me. Something, it was like worlds collided in that moment where I had this realization that, oh my gosh, that's my Shua. And I, that's not what he said. I had a hard time not standing up and really arguing. I really thought I was going to lose control and impulsively stand up and argue with the Sunday school teacher or the pastor. So I really had a hard time and I listened and I actually did. I would look things up the best I could. And my personal experiences were so real in one way, and then being in this third dimensional reality where you can touch people and hear with your ears, with your physical ears, and see people agree on this agreed upon construct or belief, right? That was very real too. So it was sort of like I had this deep, deep knowing that there is like a God, creator, source, universal love, whatever, however you want to believe in that, it is something bigger than all of us. And it's all inside of us, not outside of us, right? And that's what Shua was teaching. It's all inside. You got to go within. So I think, being so open, but not really having healthy boundaries, being in a confusing and tumultuous emotional space at home where I had the extremes, the intuitive as well as the religiosity. Very small town community with a lot of undereducated people. It's gotten a lot better over the years, I'll have to say. But um, all of that to say, even as a teen, I couldn't shut it down. Even in my early 20s, partying, getting drunk, getting high, didn't shut it down. It just made it all funky. And I had to come back to me. But there never was this belief that I was separate from what I understood as God, what I understood as spirits of people who were like, it's not like the person looked like a third dimensional person when I was a kid and talking to Shua and Mary. It was in here, just like if you were playing cowboys and Indians in your yard. You see your friend or your sibling as the cowboy, and you're the Indian or whatnot. It was that kind of thing. It was like going within and having this internal experience, which I do question if it had to do with a past life where I really did know him at his time and really was his sister. That part I don't know. It's kind of like my ego wants to push me away and say, "Wait a minute, that might be too," but it felt very real as a kid. And I think our experiences as a kid being so real to us, the city on the bottom of the lake, me laying in the bed over there, and I'm right here at the same time, Shua and Miriam, those kind of experiences to me as a kid were just as real as just me and you having a conversation right now. And I think when we grow up, every client I've ever had in my entire career, and I've been a therapist for 26 years, has always had stuff they're dealing with today that goes back to the childhood where things were very intense and very real and confusing and emotionally all over the place. So those experiences for me were sort of like just an undercurrent that was always there that gave me a sense of spiritual resiliency when things got really tough and gave me a sense of spiritual grounding in later years when I would study things and explore, and even when I would face confusion. So, in the face of trauma, right, growing up with this, in the face of trauma, we tend to have a reaction that's either fight, flight, or freeze, typically. Ongoing, long term can be also fawn, which is people pleasing. For me, I did the escape and the freeze. And when I would escape, I went into that inner world where Shua and Miriam still were, where I had these angels that I hung out with. I had these other people that I hung out with. And it wasn't like using all this for spiritual bypassing. This actually was just like woven into my own personal belief system, which is not limited to just the foundations of Christianity and these metaphysical experiences, but they definitely were building blocks. And that takes
What?
me into the energy stuff, but we'll come back to it.
Yeah, because when you mentioned the impact it had on you, it reminded me of this man that I knew, and he had a difficult childhood, from an emotional perspective, right? Things were well in the house, suburban, things like that, roof, bit food in your belly, but emotional connection wasn't there. And
Mhm.
he said when he started to go out and have relationships, he found it very difficult to connect emotionally.
Yes. Yeah.
And it would scare him when someone would try to get really close because then he would push away because he didn't know what that was. His baseline
Right.
was we don't share emotions, we don't experience it. His parents even slept in separate bedrooms, which seems to be more and more common these days.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it was just an unfortunate situation for him.
Yeah.
But that energy followed him wherever he went from a connection
Mhm.
perspective. When you mentioned some of the things that you've gone through and the people that you work with, what kind of impacts do you see that their childhood experiences, generational trauma has on their relationships?
You name it. I mean, I could write a whole book on that, right? So, one of mine personally was abandonment because my parents divorced when I was two. So there's not as much explicit memory of my father being around, even though he did visit a few times growing up, but there's more of that implicit memory of him being there and then not, right? So for me, the fear of abandonment prevented me from committing fully in relationships over time. People who got really angry and explosive or would lash out physically, uh, it would keep me from getting close to them. I would completely like run the other way and be like, I'm not, which I think that is a good thing, but I'm not going to deal with that, right? I don't want to be hurt. And luckily, none of my, adult love relationships or even friendships really have ever gotten to a point like that. Of course, being trained in therapy, I've learned how to just sit with that and not allow it to, when someone else is having those expressive emotions, unless they literally are trying to attack me, then I notice within myself, I have to de-escalate the situation very quickly for both of us sometimes. But that doesn't happen very often either. Um, the emotional distance, yes, with the challenges with my mother and my grandmother. Now, luckily, I had my great grandparents and my great aunt who lived next door. So that gave me, pretty good stability there because they were healthy. Um, but it was almost like emotional unpredictability. So I learned to read micro expressions, which really helps as a therapist. But most people who've had interpersonal trauma do the same thing, whether you realize it or not. You will notice that tiny little twitch under the eye, right? When somebody is, getting activated, and you may feel that sense of anxiety when other people are looking at them and going, "What is your problem? Are you psychic?" Yeah, that's kind of what psychic is we pick up on information further away than what we've been told is the norm, right? And I say further away just to kind of give us a sense because there is no time and space, but I'm not going there right now. So yes, uh, a lot of the challenges I see too, and I've had this as well, is this authoritative, excuse me, when you have a major power differential and a child is taught that they are small, they're supposed to be quiet, right? You don't talk back, you don't argue, your opinion doesn't matter, is the message that kids get. And going into relationships later in life, even friendships in school and teens and all that, but relationships where you have a person who is a leader, who has natural leadership qualities, but then they exert a little power and force and think they have power over others, and they do in a way. Okay. That can make somebody kind of shrink and be submissive where they need to stand up and have a backbone. I really had to learn how to have a backbone, and now I don't give a shit. You can get in my face. I'm like, and anyway, excuse me. Anyways, a lot of people do have that I can't speak up for myself. And this is where my healing got really, really powerful when I learned to reclaim my voice because the divine feminine energy definitely came to me through me. I woke it back up. I reclaimed my voice. That's why I'm speaking on podcasts and doing public speaking engagements now. But it's sort of like what we experience now in our current day with not really having a voice. How many of us have a voice against the IRS? I mean, what do they do with our money anyway? Somebody please tell me. We don't feel like we have much of a voice with our government outside of our ballot, maybe some activism or lobbying or something like that, but we don't feel like what about with your boss? Many places you can't go to your boss and say, "I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that." Right? So the feminine voice was quieted, shut down for a very long time. And when women would stand up and be bold and have a backbone and speak their piece and be firm and assertive, they were called aggressive and called bitches instead of a sacred portal. So our world did a flip flop. And now we have an imbalanced society, and we have a high rate of divorce because men don't really understand what divine masculine means. Now, some men are coming around, and I'm so grateful to see that. And the women don't know what divine feminine is, and they're masculinized from a very strong, controlling patriarchal society. So, the voice, being able to have a voice and to feel empowered. So, power is masculine, power over, kind of if you think of it that way, and empowerment is feminine. And we have to balance the two within because we all have both within, right? When we do that and we really step into our heart and live from our heart, from our divinity, and we heal all of that trauma, all that generational and ancestral trauma, we become a whole new being. We're no longer in that duality. We've transcended that duality and we become new, the celestial being, right? The cosmic human, cosmic divine human. I got to say homo luminous, the human of light, right? But yes, you know, scientifically, they've even proven that Trauma affects DNA, and it definitely affects the mitochondria, which are passed from female to female to female to female. So it doesn't mean that males are excluded entirely, but it means that those trauma signatures often present in the woman's body. Now, you shut down a woman's sacredness as being a sacred portal, and you have her carry thousands of years of trauma, and she still heals it. What is that?
You raised a couple of things, Mindy, when you mentioned that the power over people and the conflict, the inner conflict that men and women seem to be going through when it comes to maybe how we are to operate in a world that could be most balanced. Could it could one of the reasons be that maybe men and women no longer see the benefit of being masculine or feminine? They're trying to just get what they can get before they die.
Well, and that's why I say we have to bring sacred back to our everyday living. And sitting in a church pew is not necessarily going to be all it takes. So we have to recognize that each one of us are a divine being. We are eternal. I have this experience, well, I can't say experience, an intervention that I do with my clients oftentimes when we need to shift perspective in a big way is walking into a movie theater where there's no one in there but you, and you sit down with your popcorn and your Coke and you look at the screen. And then you can see you're standing behind you, and you can see you sitting in that seat, eating your popcorn and drinking your soda and looking at the screen. And you can notice all the feelings that you're feeling. You can notice what it feels like to sit in that seat. You can notice what you're looking at and taking in on the screen. So, who is the you standing?
Good
Who is
question.
the you that can observe what you're thinking and feeling right now? Who is the you that is doing that? That is like your observer self. Some would say wise mind, some would say higher self, right? That part of us that is eternal. And we know that energy can't be created nor destroyed, but it can change form. So, what are we? We know we're not just this flesh and blood, not just this avatar personality or whatever. There is something more, and the conditioning, all of the control for thousands of years, the us versus them mentality that's been repeated as a narrative over and over and over again, just so that one group has power over, right, another. We see this now. We see this now in our world. I mean, most recently with ICE here in the US, right? All of that stuff. So really the inner turmoil and just trying to get mine is the shadow aspect of the human in living form because we've taken the sacredness away. And guess what you're going to attract if that's how you're living, as far as relationships are concerned? Because like attracts like, right?
For one thing I want to point out in regards to you said like attracts like, there's a number of women out there who are, let's say, in survival mode, right? Let's say the single mother. They're
Yes.
working long hours, maybe working two jobs. They're trying to make it work. So they're tapping into their feminine energy and their masculine energy. Now,
Mhm.
there's a group of men out there who are feeling not worthy because of standards that were set, and they're
Mhm.
not as successful as they are, and they're no longer happy. They're feeling lonely, suicidal thoughts, mental health, which is a little bit higher for men than it is for women. So you have these two groups struggling in different ways, but they're struggling and they're losing focus of who they are because of the events that are around them. Some are their choice, some are not.
Right.
There's a conflict within them that maybe prevents them from accepting one of the identities that you shared to find happiness because there's a
Right.
distraction. The single mother has to work long hours. The single man is feeling lonely and he doesn't know if he's worthy enough for the life that we're describing. How can we reach those two people to let them know that you are worthy of this life?
I would say remember and trust your inner knowing and trusting community. People have got to come back to community. The single mom would have free daycare. If you really look at the way communities have to band together when we have some kind of crisis, right? It's like a trauma bonding that happens, but it happens from the heart. And that's our true human nature. That's what we've got to get back to. And men for so long have been taught that, this is what macho means. You gotta, play a sport and work out and have the big truck and the big house and the big job and all this crap. While on the inside, all of the emotions that they've not truly shared and processed over the years are in their shadow because men have been told from a very young age, boys don't cry. And that's bullshit. We know this, right? And even and I'm just as guilty of this myself, even in our attempts to console a child, let's say a 4-year old who fell off his little tricycle and skinned his knee, he comes running to the adult, right? Because he's coming to someone because he's hurt and he needs regulation. His nervous system is saying, I need to go somewhere safe because I'm hurting. And what is our immediate response sometimes? You're okay. You just invalidated him. That is not his experience in the moment. In the moment, he is not okay. So very early, we don't even realize how much the conditioning has caused these things. So what I would say is rethink everything, question everything, do your research, be willing to actually look at yourself, be willing to say, there is more to this than what I'm being shown. There's more to this than what I feel like I'm forced to. You're not powerless. We are not powerless. We've been made to think that we are powerless and small and dependent. And the opposite is true. When we take back our sovereignty and we band together in community and we actually work on what is really healthy, what is really healthy, what you're going to see is you're going to see a whole new world. You're going to see a whole new earth. And this is where we're headed. We're seeing the early stages of this. And it takes sometimes the person cracking under pressure. And just because you crack under pressure doesn't mean that you go off to la la land. And, sometimes you may need some mental health stabilization, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be completely off your rocker. It just means you're going to be fed up. And that's what it takes to have revolution, anyways. And I'm not here trying to push any kind of political agendas or any kind of like religious agendas or anything like that. I think if you look around, if you're educated enough and you've got eyes to see and ears to hear, you can see that we're kind of getting to this tipping point where people are just fed up with the way things are. Again, I didn't agree to give the IRS a third of my income. They told me they were the authority, but I didn't choose that. I don't, I choose who's the authority over me now. So why do I have to give in to that, right? And so it starts with questioning things like that and saying, let me look into that. And if we have enough people, I think everybody's seen that satire of the people bent over with the chessboard on their back, and there's like a bunch of people under the chessboard, and you have like two people playing chess, and it says they don't realize that if they stood up, the game would be over. And I think that's kind of where we're at, collectively speaking.
Do
I
you
think
think
many of
it's
us are
safer for some people to defer to someone else because maybe they don't trust their own voice or their own
Mhm.
authority?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is, look at who really doesn't have a voice. Our elders don't really have much of a voice. They need our help, right? Children, we need to allow them to have a voice, but we have to give them the parameters to use that voice in a healthy way, right? Give them the teachings. We have people who are, mental health, having major mental health issues, cognitive delays, some who have like very physical disabilities that make it difficult for them to do some of the things that they would otherwise do. So there's enough people out there that, and I'm not saying that just because you have mental illness and or disabled that you don't have a voice. I'm just saying it makes it a little bit more challenging sometimes. But if you think about our ancestors who couldn't fight back, who couldn't get back on the ship and go back to Africa, who couldn't walk back from Oklahoma and Mississippi, who watched their loved ones be killed in front of their own eyes for not complying, women beaten, raped, and burned at the stake, stoned to death, all because they were picking herbs. I think we're all kind of like, we have to take a look and say, okay, how much control do we really have here? And can I find the smallest little bit of my voice, at least on the behalf of someone who doesn't have a voice, or my ancestors who didn't have a voice? Because I'll be damned, we can't just keep staying silent because all that does is it perpetuates the control and the trauma.
I think that's tough for a lot of people to do, Mindy, because
This
from
is
when
where
we're
professional
born,
help,
exactly,
professional
right?
help
No,
can help.
we're both going to put our hats on here. A child is born, healthy child is born to both parents. Up until a certain age, whether it's 18, 21, whatever the age is, they've given up their authority to the betterment of themselves, right? Because they can't fend for themselves, they can't provide for themselves. I think we all can agree with that, right?
Right, right.
There comes a point in that child's life as they're becoming an adult or maturing down that path that they would ultimately start to do things for themselves.
Mhm,
Unfortunately, and maybe you've seen this,
mhm.
that was at a very young age, generations ago. Now that age has been pushed forward to 20s, 30s. Some people, they
Yeah,
don't get until their 40s,
yeah.
right?
The world's not made it
So
easy.
the world hasn't made it easy. So when you have the average person experiencing that lifestyle, let's say 21, because here in Canada is 18 for Asian majority, 21 in a lot of places in the States there. So let's say from 21, they deferred their authority and for the most part, their decision making skills to someone else. Now that they're out in the world as an adult and the world views them as such, we're expecting them to be able to make the decisions for themselves. But if they were never taught or shown what it looks like from a healthy perspective,
Right,
how would they ever learn it?
right, right. Well, I think for one, innate mental health takes over to a degree. And, we do see some who fall to the, substance abuse and struggling with like low income job to low income job. Some want to because like for me, I wanted to get out of a little podunk town. I wanted to be, understand things more. I wanted to live in the world, not just in this little podunk town. So there's got to, I think when that happens, the anxiety is so high that innate mental health pushes the person forward in some form. Now, it may take a while, but usually they will start asking questions. Hey, man, how'd you get that job? Well, how do I do an application for financial aid for college? Like, how do you know what you want to do? So it's in the questioning, and those age groups now are great at getting online and looking things up. They find out for themselves. They ask their other people in their social media groups and their gaming groups and all that kind of stuff. And they do have some interesting ideas of like careers that haven't been thought of before. But they get, I think, creative. And I think most people, when pushed to the brink, it's not just about survival. It is, but it's also, why am I surviving? For what? The question is there. Why not just give in and not survive? What is making me survive? And that is that resiliency, that innate mental health is there, and some drive to go, okay, I got to have some direction. Even if they shut down and they're depressed and, playing video games in the basement for 5, 10 years. But I think for the most part, we see those who don't have a solid plan, who don't have as much family or community support to get them through that hump of life that the world has created. Um, they they start I think they tend to, they have a whole, that generation has a whole different way of having social interaction. And I think it comes down to they get creative. They start asking questions.
Like I look at
And
you
then,
and I, right? Like for what you're saying, you've had an event in your life that pushed you down that path. I had an event that pushed
oh,
us down
yeah,
that path,
several times.
right? There you go. So, in general, then, is that needed, that canon tragic event to push the person
No,
forward?
no, no. It's absolutely not needed. It's not normal, I don't think. Not truly. I think we all need some challenges in life, but we don't have to have such challenges that push us to that level. This is a failure of society. And I would say the failure of society comes from the systems of control and all the conditioning for so long. So it all goes back to the same thing over and over again. So when I have these young people, I often have college students that come and sit on my couch. When I have these young people in here, it's depression, anxiety, depression, anxiety, depression. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get a degree, so I'm doing something, right? I want to do this and I want to do this and want to do this because they grew up with devices in their hands where they had multiple different stimulus coming from different areas. So just about every one of them's got ADHD because of it. So, so it's like they have a hard time sort of collapsing timelines. And what I have seen in the trauma healing, because trauma literally is an energy, it's an energetic experience that hits the nervous system, overwhelms the nervous system, and then kind of gets stuck in there. And if you look at Bester Vanderkolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score, if you look at that book and you really read it, when I read that book, it dawned on me I was already doing Reiki. I was like, whoa, I can put these together and I can actually really do some work. So, and along the way, I studied various other energy healing modalities and was like, why not get in on the ground floor with this to begin with? Instead of clients sitting on my couch, frustrated, confused because they're all over the place and they lack the support and they're holding on to this trauma and stuff, why not get the energy of the trauma out of the way and then deal with the rest? Instead of let's build all these coping skills. Now, my clients don't have to even talk about the trauma to release it. Once they release the energy of it, then they can go back and talk about it with the coping skills that they've built. But we don't have to go from the outside in, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It does, because, and that's why I asked that, because there's that quote, right, which is probably as old as time, where it's hard times create strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times, right?
Never heard
And
that.
and I share that
It's very
because
true.
there's people out there that, and they're totally oblivious to what is going on, because from their perspective there's nothing wrong with it. Like, you call it, you may say that it's a patriarchy, it's a matriarchy, misogynistic, misandry. People use all these different terms to kind of label and to a degree shame the other side.
Right.
But then there's some people that are walking through life, they're like, I don't see any of that. Their life, because they're so unbothered, they may
Mhm.
not see some of those things. Someone shared with me today, actually. She's in her 70s. And she was like, Taryn, I didn't know what racism or prejudice was until I moved to Canada. Right? Because it wasn't something that her perception took place. That doesn't mean that 70 years ago it wasn't there. It was
Right.
just in her peripheral
Right. Wasn't
around
in her
her.
world.
It
Right.
wasn't in her world, right? So
Right.
when we speak about some of these things, it's in our world because one, you and I have experienced it, and two, you and I are in that industry. But to someone else who, they're looking at us and they're like, Mindy, what are you talking about? Like, these systems are great. Like, I maybe I'll go to college, I go to
hmm
university, I have a nice car,
hmm
2.5
hmm
children, white picket fence, dog
hmm
named Sparky.
hmm
The
And
American
this is where
dream, right?
ignorance is bliss makes sense.
There you go. Could that be one of the
Because
reasons
the
why we
it's
don't move forward? Because of the ignorance?
I would say, if it's not in your world, if it's not in your perspective, if it's not having some kind of negative effect on you that's forcing you to ask the big questions, to break out of, as some people call the matrix, but matrix actually comes from the word mother. So I don't, I'm going to have to rethink that. But if that's not part of their experience, then why would they be bothered by things until they get enough objectivity to see it from a distance and at least their natural human empathy activate. We don't, we're not in Ukraine or in Gaza, right? We aren't physically there. Well, I mean, some people maybe. I don't think you guys are watching if you're there. But what I mean is that if you are not in the war zone, right, and you're over here playing video games, shooting people, right, that war over there is just as fake as the one you're looking at, or the one here is just as real as what you're hearing about the one over there. So that fantasy and reality gets kind of meshed, and ignorance is bliss until you have one of the gamer, for example, and I don't mean to really put labels, but it really helps us understand this, right? Until the gamer who is oblivious, really, and they're like, oh, I saw that on the news, or I saw that scrolling on my phone, right? But they don't give much attention to. I didn't realize just how bad the death toll in Venezuela was until I actually looked, because I don't watch a lot of news media, right? But until one of their friends actually says, hey man, have you heard about this shit? Can you believe this is going on? And then you have these kids who've grown up with this blissful ignorance, but also the capability of getting knowledge from everywhere and absorbing whatever they're curious in. I mean, I had to look stuff up in an encyclopedia when I was that age, right? So it's kind of it's kind of like I see a bit of a split among different groups. I'm not saying it's like one against the other as much as I'm saying you have these different groups that sort of like subcultures that have emerged where some don't care. As long as I got my video games and my favorite snacks and my headset, you know, um, and
Passion
as long
fatigue.
as, right. I mean, as long as I'm get mommy and daddy are paying for me to go to college and I could still live at home, I don't have to pay rent, so I can sit here and play on my video game. I see that dynamic a lot. Now, I do see another group that because of the stuff at home, right? They're like, I got to figure out. This is where they start asking the question. I got to figure out how to get the hell out of here. So some of them will go in the military, some will go in the workforce, some will, make their way and go to college. And you have those that are motivated, they're living from those negative motivators to because that innate mental health is saying, I'm not safe here and there's got to be more. I'm meant for more. I wouldn't be going through all this hell, and this is what we do in therapy, right? When we start having we have the client go into meaning making as they're healing and they say, oh, wait a minute, if I had not gone through blank, I wouldn't have this perspective or whatnot. And they start finding purpose when they start finding meaning. They start creating a whole new identity, and their intuition goes from fear based and, kind of limited to expansive because it goes into self love.
Is that a lonely journey for people?
I think a lot of people do feel kind of lonely in it. And I have had many clients talk to me and say things like, you're the only one that gets me. And that's really sad to me that even with, professional help, people still don't feel connected to many other people in their lives. And when you finally do, it's kind of like people are like, oh, my soul tribe, just because they finally connect with somebody. Maybe they're right.
Well, one of the things, like when it comes to friendships, right? You can make friends. Where we usually make our friends are school, work, right? Family connections,
Right.
right? But we do that at a very young age, right? Like middle school, high school, and perhaps college, university. But by the time you get out into the workforce, unless you develop something really good at work, you're gonna have you make fewer friends as you get older. Right? Men in general make far fewer friends than
Mhm.
women do, right? So when you have someone that is feeling lonely, because this journey is not some the journey we're talking about is not something that you're going to do when you're 5 years old. You're probably going to do it later on in life. Now they have a choice. Do I leave behind the majority of my friends who maybe can't make that journey with me? Hence why I'm feeling lonely. Because when I look at the other side where Mindy is, where Terrain is, they may have their friends, but they're further along. Or do I just say, hey, this is the chaos that I know. It's not killing me, but at least I'm not alone. Like, what do you see that being an obstacle where they just don't think that they can make that leap because they have to leave so much behind?
Yes and no. Yes, in that, it is a very lonely place when you're healing from trauma specifically. It does feel like you're alone. And what I can say is, I tell my clients, I've been where you're at. I know what that's like. I can't say that I know exactly what you're feeling because we all experience feelings different, but I know what it's like to be in that, and that gives you, that's hope. If you really think about it, that's part of the process. If you are lonely long enough, you're going to do one of two things typically. You're either going to shut down, right? Or you're going to be motivated to try to connect. And then you say, okay, how do I connect? Well, what are my interests, right? What are my interests? And so this is where social media has been a helpful tool in connecting people with similar interests. So you have like knitting groups. You got guys that play fantasy football, right? You've got people who go on vacations together as groups. You got bikers that get out and have a club and go to Thunder Beach. So you have all these little groups that, communities like I'm like a learner. I want to learn about healing modalities and, esoteric stuff and metaphysics and psychology and philosophy. So I personally am drawn to um, places where people, go to learn together, not just independent, self-paced courses and stuff. But many people get a lot out of that connection when you have, say, a course where you have a Facebook group, like everybody talks on this Facebook group or whatnot. So I encourage my clients to find their interests, to find other people who are similar, who have similar interests, to do one small, tiny thing out of their norm every day to help them overcome the everyday generalized anxiety that comes with having PTSD. So if you do one thing every day for 60 days, you can eliminate a lot of anxiety. And a lot of the anxiety people carry because of especially interpersonal trauma is social anxiety. And if you look at our youth, they don't even have to be traumatized to have social anxiety. Hey, I think we all go through social anxiety when we're teenagers, But a lot of these kids have been so distant connecting this way without being in each other's physical space. Yes, it's still an energetic connection. It's still an energetic exchange, but to be physically in the space feels very different. I don't have the words for that, honestly, but kids who are used to interacting this way with peers, when they have to interact without a device, they just clam up. They don't know what to do. They get really anxious. So sometimes it's baby steps with them. Sometimes it's saying, I know you feel pretty alone in this, but here's a story about somebody, and it gives them inspiration. I think just connecting even through a story about somebody who, a real story, right, of somebody who has been through something similar to you makes the person step forward, like the energy goes out to connect, right? Because we stay pulled in and withdrawn a lot of times when we're walking around carrying unhealed wounds. It's like being a turtle trying to like go in and, let the shell keep the world from causing more harm. And at some point, we got to put our arms and legs and head out.
It's one thing to use it as protection, it's another thing to live inside of it, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
You mentioned
And that's scary.
isolation then. Yeah, you mentioned
Yes,
isolation. So if
yes.
we were the type of person that's isolating because of our trauma and we want to come out there, where can we find healthy examples of that safe space so we can come out of our shells and be more interactive?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different places you could go online and look things up, and that's fine. Most of us have a 3 minute attention span these days. So, looking for groups, looking for some kind of connection. But a lot of times, if the person's oscillating and they're depressed, they're not motivated to even do that. They just want to scroll through TikTok or look at, somebody's Instagram that actually we know statistically can make it worse because there's that comparative thing, right? Everybody wants to show everybody how great their life is, and other people are like, oh my God, they got a better life than me, and da 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 da. And they're trying to get those dopamine hits to feel better. I would say the way I have approached this before is I validate what they're doing. You're in your shell, you're licking your wounds, so to speak, you're processing. You don't want to be around other people because you're so overwhelmed right now. Just one more thing feels like too much energy, too much overload. So take the time you need and honor that. That's a form of self-love, and you'll be surprised how that affects the psyche when the person realizes, oh, this isn't necessarily abnormal. What's abnormal about it is how long you stay there. It's not the isolation itself, because we all need that from time to time. We all need that me time or that let me separate from everybody time to go in and have do that introspective work and process through those wounds, feel those wounds. A lot of people think that if a person's isolating, they're avoiding the feelings, and that's really not the issue. That's not always the case. A lot of times that's how they can feel the feelings because the world has not made it safe for us to openly express our feelings. So many people will go. I remember going to my bedroom. Most people go when they were young, the bedroom was their safe place unless you had some kind of, trauma happen in the bedroom. But most people will go to their bedroom and lay on their bed literally and think through and feel those feelings. And they go back and forth between thoughts and feelings, thoughts and feelings. Eventually, that dialectic does happen. In most cases, the person comes up with something new or their mind gets shifted in that process and they hit something that gives them just a little bit of motivation. And when professionals like us validate that and say, wow, you honored what your feelings needed, you honored what your energy needed by going in and self healing. So you have the ability. When I say you have the ability to heal yourself, and I can use good examples from my clients, that's powerful. It's, excuse me, empowering for my clients. And
What
then they buy in, right? They buy into, okay, maybe this therapy thing will help.
what do you think are some of the obstacles that are preventing people from embracing self-care and self-love?
We haven't been taught what it really looks like. I mean, go get a massage, you know, go drink a few beers with your buddies. I mean, some of that, okay, you can kind of put that on surface level self-care, but what is real self-care? Maybe getting a definition of what it is, first of all. Second of all, again, our world has made us kind of feel powerless and looking for something sacred outside of ourselves and disconnected from one another. So why would I love me? Who am I? If you're carrying those unhealed wounds and those negative core beliefs and you're carrying the energy of that trauma, right? Why would you love yourself? Because me gets hurt, right? When they're stuck in that victim mentality, why would I love me? So I with my NLP ear, listen for those first little indicators that they're doing something for themselves. And that's where I start. So helping people to redefine what is self-care and why do you do it? It's not enough to just eat right, sleep, and get some exercise. That's what we're told. And you know what? Salad costs more than a burger. Exercise doesn't always feel good. And sleep, it can be evasive, especially if you're dealing with anxiety. And if you got depression, it can be too much. So you're going one and then the other and back and forth. So we don't really know what it means to love ourselves. And if we don't love ourselves, why would we take care of ourselves? Right. So starting with something small where the person decided to get a haircut, shave their beard a little differently, you know, try on a different outfit, something, a style that they haven't done before, right? Little things like that says there's something in you that does want to connect, that does want to heal, that does want to have a sense of purpose.
Can some people be afraid of loving themselves because if they start to love themselves, then it opens themselves up to be loved by others?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. If love has been devastatingly a devastating loss, whether, a bad breakup or death, abandonment, those kind of things, avoiding love, avoiding allowing yourself to be loved, is a protective factor, right? But if I don't love me, then I can keep other people from loving me too, right? I could keep people at a distance. Years ago, I worked at a residential facility for teens, and we had a new intake one day. This is a great story. Okay. I think she was 14, 15. She comes in dressed all in black, goth look, right? She's got black lipstick, black fingernails. Her face is painted a little bit white. And she had taken a permanent marker and drawn what's the triple goddess symbol, which is like crescent moon, full moon, crescent moon, and then a pentagram, one on each arm, right? And I knew exactly what she was doing when she walked in the door. She was making the statement of, I want and need attention, but I want you to be afraid of me. I want to keep you at a distance because when people do get close, they hurt me. So I walked right up to her while other people, I was noticing these other staff members were looking like side-eyeing this kid. And I'm like, you're giving in to exactly what she wants right now, and that's not going to be helpful. So I walked right up to her and I said, are you wicked? She just looked at me like, who the hell are you to talk to me? So, and this kid did not want to do her 1 hour with Miss Mindy once a week. And I told her, I said, well, I found out she loved to read and she was into like spiritual stuff. And I had a bunch of books of different kinds. And I told her, I said, you don't have to talk to me, but you got to sit on my couch for an hour. So you might as well read a book. And that's how I connected with her, is to be where she was and to say, I'm not going to hurt you. At the same time, I'm not going to let you run away from me. When we don't let them run, right? We let them know when we create a safe space, what is there to run from? Except for, oh, what if this person really loves me? What if they flip on me and those kind of things? Yes, that's possible. That's always going to be in the back of somebody's mind when they've had interpersonal trauma, right? But it doesn't have to be in the foreground making the decisions. And so, yeah, being able to keep people at a distance also keeps you at a distance, right? What are you doing? If you're not connected, we're meant to be social creatures. We wouldn't have eyeballs if we weren't. I mean, I think Tom Hanks showed us that in the movie Castaway, right? For our sanity, we have to have other eyeballs, right? So, being disconnected from yourself and not loving yourself is that's where the root is to begin with. It's not, let me push people away and not love me. It's, I don't love me. I'm scared of me. I'm scared of being vulnerable because I get hurt. So let me not love the person that always gets hurt, the me that always gets hurt, right? So I'm going to create some kind of persona with a wall, you know, and that keeps people at a distance and they stay disconnected. So they're disconnected from themselves first. And we definitely see this in like DID with disassociation that happens a lot with trauma, right? So how do we come back to ourselves, right? How do we come back to that you that is afraid of getting hurt, the you that did get hurt and love them anyway? I use a lot of IFS there with people in that situation.
I remember reading about that, and I found it to be very informative, and it helped me to understand a lot of things when it came to using IFS and how people interact. And there's something that you shared where the person in your example, right, where she wanted that connection, but then there was another part of her that there was like that internal conflict,
Right.
right? I want the attention, but I want to let everyone know that it's not going to be easy. For
Right.
those who are, let's say, aren't in the industry that you and I are in, but they're just everyday people, let's say they're their partners, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case is, what
Mhm.
advice can you give to them who they're in a relationship with someone like this, friendship or romantic, and they find out that their partner or their person is experiencing those types of mixed signals from their perspective where they want you close, but they're afraid if you get too close, you're going to hurt them. So they may be doing things to counter that.
Well, I would say number one, call them out on it. I mean, don't stay silent about it for real, but you don't have to do it in a mean way. But I would say remember the love that you have for that person and learn. Learn about what that person may be going through. Get some information, go to a professional, whatever, right? But being able to stay there and stand firm and say, I still love you, I'm still here. Holding that space for that person. And that's hard if they've got their own shit they're dealing with. So, again, I would say reach out, find community that's supportive, find professionals to help navigate that. But being able to just hold that space for the other person without that person feeling overwhelmed or threatened, right? Gives the other person a chance to come back and regulate with you. If you can stay calm and keep your nervous system regulated while your partner, your friend, your family member is dysregulated, if they know you care and they know that they're loved by you, but they're struggling anyways, you just stay as regulated as possible and they will eventually come to you because when we're dysregulated, we're drawn towards regulation. It's part of our natural innate mental health. And we go to people that feel safe. So be a safe person.
So be a safe person for yourself as well as your partner.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Is that hard for people to achieve? Because that's a load to carry.
I would say it really depends on the person. I mean, I don't think there's a way to really like predict that. If a person has the ability to realize that the person that they love is reacting to something in the past and not so much to them. If they can bring in that, if they have that knowledge, if they've had some help to get to have that and understand what a regulated nervous system means, it means you're able to see beyond your person to see what they're struggling with. I love the person behind these behaviors. I love the person behind these feelings that are coming out. And the feelings and the behaviors are not that person. That's example or that's sort of like the symptoms of the struggle that they're having. Can I love the person through the struggle? Can I stay firm? Can I love me enough, even in my struggles, to still stay firm for them? Does that make sense?
It does, for better or for worse.
Yes.
The only problem
And
is
whether
that's
that,
subjective.
right. I mean, there's a breaking point we all know, right? I did 8 years of my career in substance abuse, and oftentimes the person struggling was abandoned because their loved ones got tired of being hurt by them, by their choices, by the fear that their substance use caused that person, by the person being just unstable in so many different ways, right? And they felt unsupported. And when they come together, this is the reason AA kind of works for a lot of people and NA is because then they don't feel alone. They feel supported. They have other people who understand why whereas their family members can't really understand because they're hurt. They can't get through that. They need their own therapy, right? That's why Al Anon was even formed. So, it is a challenge, but the most important thing is to always come back to the heart. Come back to the heart. Come back to the heart. At the same time, you do not have to enable toxic behavior, period. You do not. You are not required to stay in relation with someone who is constantly disrespectful, abusive, and not willing to work on your relationship. You can cut them off. It is okay. It's healthy, actually. It says, I love me enough to put a boundary, a barrier, or just completely cut off this person because of the behaviors.
What role do you think maybe guilt plays when someone has to create a boundary that now cuts off or ends a friendship?
That's a really good question because I would say I would look at where's the shame really, because the shame is what locks in the guilt. Shame is I feel bad. I feel like a bad person, right? I'm a piece of shit for having to cut them off. I feel guilty because the expectation is that I should love them even though they're my brother, right? And if I don't do that, if I put a boundary or I cut them off, that means I don't love them. Well, that's not the truth. You do love them. You're just not willing to tolerate their behavior. It's the behavior you don't love, right? So setting boundaries with someone is as simple as saying, if you continue to call me that name, I'm going to walk out the room because I'm not going to listen to it. And you do it every time. You have to be consistent, right? If you feel guilty for setting a boundary with someone or even cutting off someone that's toxic, look at your expectations. What are your expectations as it pertains to relationships, to self love, to love of the person, and non tolerance of their behavior? If the expectations are unreasonable given the circumstances, then that disappointment and that guilt can definitely take somebody into shame that locks all of that in. I'm just a piece of shit because I cut them off and da 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 da. No, we got to look at that, right? We got to get through the wall of shame because it's worse than the guilt.
Mindy, let me ask you one final question before I let you go, but I want to give you three wishes for this question, okay?
Oh,
What are three things you wish people knew about the benefits of establishing firm boundaries and why?
one major benefit is recognition that you have self-respect because you're not setting the boundaries necessarily for the other person. You're setting it for yourself, for your safety, for your health, whatever it may be. It's saying that I have enough respect for my own being that I'm not going to tolerate blank, right? So self-respect is one. That's one thing that I wish people would understand. If you go into guilt, flip the switch and see where am I actually respecting me by doing this, right? And you said two other wishes that I wish people knew about this. Oh my gosh. I wish people knew that you can love the person and not love the behaviors. You can set limits on the behaviors without setting limits on the person. You can tell that uncle who keeps coming over drunk, right? I love you and I love spending time with you when you're not drinking. So if you come to my house and you're drinking, then I'm going to ask you to leave because I don't tolerate that in my house, right? Because it gets ugly and sloppy. You can't just have one, right? So it's not like you are the problem. It is what you're doing is the problem. My respect is my home doesn't have alcohol in it. You know this. You've been informed of this. It's not you that's not allowed. It's that drinking that's not allowed. So love the person. I wish people would remember love the person, not the behavior. Boundaries, parameters, cutoffs. That's for self-respect. So thirdly, let me think. Good challenge. Thirdly, I wish people would know that once you state a boundary, you have to reinforce it. And here's a good reason why. I want you to think about a small child playing in the yard and they run to the street. If you tell that child, and let me give the disclaimer, I do not I do not endorse violence towards children. I do not endorse abuse or hitting a child. This example is, boy, if you run out in that street again, I'm gonna whoop your ass, right? Now, how many times has somebody said that to a kid for their own safety, right? That we have well intentions when we say that. We're being firm because it scares us, right? But if you watch that kid run out in the road and you just go snatch them back and you just talk to them and yell at them, you didn't follow through with what you said you were going to follow through with. Teenagers, I catch you on Discord again, you lose your phone, right? If you don't take that phone, that kid is not going to respect the next time you say, if you do blank, this is going to happen because you don't follow through. So being consistent, you're going to initially have whoever the boundary is with, they're going to buck because they're used to you not having it there. They're going to buck, they're going to test it, they're going to get pissed, they're going to like maybe make it your fault. They're all going to do all those things potentially at first. But the more you stay firm and consistent with it, and you follow through with whatever the consequences are, they will eventually back off and respect that boundary, meaning they've developed some respect for you because you had self respect first.